It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. And no, your eyes are not deceiving you. It's all three of us. Nick Farabaugh also joining the show. I feel like this is the first time since the NFL draft that it's been all three of us on the show. Nick, how we doing, pal?
I'm doing well. It's a great day. It's a hot day. But all is going well. Alan is on a drive that's not Steelers afternoon drive, but he is on an afternoon drive. I believe he is, at least.
Yeah, I was.
For him.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I was covering a court hearing today for former Pitt safety Paris Ford, who has some felony charges. So not a Steelers drive today, but still an afternoon drive, and I'm taking it with my buddies, so it's good. It's good.
There we go. Nick, you mentioned the weather. Real quick, I do have to say, you texted me a screenshot of what the weather was going to look like and said you were going to be in Hawaii and it was going to be hotter in Pittsburgh than when you're in Hawaii.
Yeah, I'm going there starting tomorrow, and it is literally going to be 14 degrees cooler over there than it is here. Which is bonkers, but like legitimately, I mean, it's going to be colder all week over there.
Yeah, my plan is either be in air conditioning or be in my pool. It's going to be one of those two things every second that I'm up.
I think
we might have to do an episode of afternoon. We just might have Steelers afternoon pool, where it's just me and you in the pool. Like that. Yeah. That may need to be an episode.
I mean, we know how the audience would feel about it. Would be great content. I don't see that going poorly from a content standpoint. So I'm down for it. A little bit of news to talk about. A transaction today. The Steelers moving on from Denzel Mims, former second overall pick. Not their second overall pick, but they got him last October coming over. The Frisman Jackson connection, obviously, he coached him at Baylor, so it made sense for them to get a look. But he doesn't even get the training camp with them, competing for a bottom of the roster depth chart, wide receiver spot, obviously, but no more. Nick, I know a lot of people have had questions about the timing of this move taking place here in the middle of June, but obviously the UFL season just wrapped up. It could be one of those guys coming and taking a roster spot. I'm not saying roll out completely one of the bigger picture things that we've talked about, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that is what this is.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that this is Brandon Aiyuk, for example. I know that's the big one, and certainly Brandon Aiyuk adding, fuel to the fire yesterday.
He's doing everything he can to have Steelers fans continue to tweet at him.
Yeah, he's doing everything he can. I mean, I don't know if he is serious about the 49ers not wanting him. It seems like another public relations tactic to try and sway pressure towards his side. It's pretty clear right now, I think, that he wants 30 plus and Niners don't want to give him that. But I don't think this is necessarily indicative of that. Again, you mentioned it could be a UFL signing, could be some guy they like that maybe just got cut. It could be so many different things, all the way down. So there's no telling exactly what it is. It could be a guy that, maybe he's just getting healthy now from an injury last year and they really like him and want to bring him in. So it could be a bunch of different things. Just because they released Denzel Mims doesn't mean that, it's a big fish. I also think it just tells us kind of what we thought about Denzel Mims. He didn't really have a great spring. He kind of just blended in. He didn't really make many stand-up plays. Didn't get the ball thrown his way that much, to be quite honest with you, mostly because he wasn't open. So there were other guys that stuck out. It's a position of need, so I would kind of be surprised if, they have a rush spot open now, but I would be surprised probably if the guy they had isn't a receiver. I think they're going to keep taking swings there. It's been a big part of what they've done. So we'll kind of see what ends up happening, but kind of tells you what they think of Denzel Mims. Not surprising. And I don't think it's indicative of a massive move coming, although it could be. It's just not, 100% sure of that.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote in my 90 thoughts over the weekend about Denzel Mims that, you could not tell by watching practice this spring that he was one of the highest drafted members of their wide receiver room. He just blended in and not in a good way. I think all this is telling us is that the Steelers think they can do better than Denzel Mims. And I think better is not a high hurdle at this point. Better could just mean another punter for training camp so Cameron Johnston doesn't have to kick every day. Better could be someone besides Cordero Patterson with experience returning kickoffs. Like 90 roster spots are not all very valuable. Like better can be whatever the team needs it to be at any given moment. So cutting the 90th guy didn't mean much. And also, I don't think, just as we sit here today, that on my list of things that need to happen for the 49ers to trade Brandon Aiyuk, we're not even like a third of the way there, right? We're not close to that type of deal being even really realistic. They're not going to trade him before they get to training camp. They're just not. Why would they? And so that's not happening. Maybe someone like Traylon Burks, like we talked about the other day. Cortland Sutton, I actually think the Broncos should want to trade him. I don't understand why they're hesitant to. So some other move like that. But if you're thinking it's Brandon Aiyuk, man, we got to have some serious mud-slinging, dart-throwing, bad feelings happening between Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers before we get there. And one TikTok video saying they don't want me, bro, is not it.
I'm trying everything that I can to make that happen, by the way. I've been DMing Brandon Aiyuk saying, hey, did you hear what they said about you? And all this other
I played hockey growing up in an adult league, and there's one referee that was a bigger dude who really liked breaking up fights. And he would just in the middle of the game be like, did you hear what they're saying about you? Just try to instigate the fights so that he could break them up. I feel like that's where you're at right now.
That is, yep, I'm playing that role right now. Nick, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to take time. Again, the 49ers literally went through this last year. The Deebo Samuel stuff was not rainbows and sunshine. He requested a trade. He literally requested a trade. I mean, I don't think Brandon Aiyuk yet. We don't have a public report yet that said Brandon Aiyuk demanded a trade out of San Francisco. That's one thing we don't have. Deebo Samuel did do that. T. Higgins did that, and T. Higgins just signed his franchise tag. So you can see how this stuff can be rectified. And listen, if the report is, and the report was provided by Mike Silver out in San Francisco that said they are offering him $26 million. If he's willing to accept an Amon-Ra St. Brown to a 30, that's really not that far apart. So honestly, I mean, there's got to be a lot of things that have to happen. This has to get pretty ugly. I think not only, Alan, is it going to have to take to training camp, I think it's going to have to take well into training camp for this to happen. Maybe even, closer to the season, during that stretch between the preseason and week one is where it would happen. I think when we really get to a point where he becomes a viable trade candidate is if it appears, that he is willing to miss games to force this issue. I think if he is willing to miss week one in order to, get a contract, that's when I think this becomes a serious talking point.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
It's interesting because I've seen a lot of the conversation, trying to lump him in with a lot of players that are on a franchise tag or other thing. The difference with him is this is a 5th-year option as opposed to a franchise tag that we're talking about. And I don't know that everybody's necessarily bringing that into the conversation.
Listen, I'm not of the opinion yet that I think Brandon Aiyuk won't show up at some point. He might hold out all of training camp. He might hold out all the preseason. But if he doesn't get a deal before the season, do you really think he's not going to show up and play? I think he would. That's my feel. I think he will show up for week one and play. And maybe that's their plan, right? Maybe they'll let him walk after this year, get that 3rd round compensatory pick and call it a day. That's very realistic plan for them to do.
I agree. I don't see why. There's a big gulf between not getting a deal done and trading him. There's a lot of middle there.
Yeah. Again, Aiyuk has to be willing, has to not only show that he is, but he has to prove that he is willing to sit out games. Or something has to happen to where the bargaining table is just so far apart and there is nothing coming between these two. It has to get, pretty ugly. But hey, listen, and I'll say this, if that does happen, you don't I know people are saying the Steelers, you don't think the Patriots, the Commanders, other teams aren't going to
The
be in on
Bills.
this guy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's going to be a
absolutely.
bidding war then too. So all of these things come together. I don't think I will say I think it's likelier than I thought it was. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I think we still have a ways to go here before the Aiyuk stuff becomes.
Something that just came to me while we were talking here is, considering the way the Steelers' schedule is backloaded, they may be better off waiting for the in-season trade deadline and waiting for some team that right now thinks they're competing for something with some player because we talked about, like, it's an awkward fit to sign Brandon Aiyuk to a long-term contract, knowing you got to pay George Pickens and not having any idea what you're doing at quarterback. So, some rental at the trade deadline, especially considering that at that point the Steelers will have played essentially none of their most important games. That might actually end up being like a more viable strategy here for Omar Khan moving forward. Something I don't really think I've considered at this point.
It could be something to watch. I also think that after the preseason, some teams might have a guy that maybe is going to pop loose, and that could maybe be traded that they don't want to yet because maybe they don't know the hierarchy of it all. So we'll see kind of how it works out. But I do think this is going to take time. I think it's going to take a while if they want to get legit too. And the Cortland Sutton stuff that you mentioned earlier seems far more out of reach than I think it did a few weeks ago. It seems like at least they're kind of reconciling that a little bit.
Everybody's saying happy things.
Yeah, right. So it seems like that one's
again. This just means I need to go to work.
Yeah,
This whole Cortland Sutton.
That one I don't understand why the Broncos want him, because they're essentially tanking the season by taking all of Russell Wilson's salary cap hit this year. Like, why not trade? I don't really understand what they're doing there.
My guess is trying to provide as much infrastructure as they can to Bo Nix. That's probably what it is. Just having a receiver like him probably will help. But regardless, I do think this wide receiver trade stuff is going to take some time. We'll see. I think the Steelers are calling around. I think they want to get something done. I think it's a matter of if the other team wants to do it with. I think that's where it's at right now.
The thing that I just find funny, like him saying they don't want me, is the interesting thing. And Adam Schefter said that's certainly not the case. I don't think Adam Schefter had to come out and say that for us to think that wasn't the case. Even putting an offer of $26 million per year, and again, to me, it'd be more about the guarantees than anything else. More curious as to what that would be. While it's lower than what we've seen these other receivers this offseason get paid, that certainly isn't a statement that to me says they don't want him.
We hate you. Here's an offer for $26 million a year. I want somebody to hate me that bad.
What Aiyuk is saying is they don't want me at my price. That's what.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, sure. And again, maybe he's taken that as a slap in the face, $26 million per year, as opposed to what some of these other receivers have gotten. And I'm not sure, but it'll be interesting.
So if it's not Aiyuk, are we all kind of in agreement that the most likely thing that is happening right now this week is that they're signing someone from the UFL, because there's like 20 of them around the league today and the UFL season just ended on Sunday?
Yeah, I would say so.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I wanted to kind of go into that because I had some people responding to me asking if there was like a certain guy that I would be looking at in the UFL to take this roster spot. But Alan, you wrote a story including a couple names from the UFL that we could potentially be looking at.
I did. I think, if it's wide receiver, there's some options out there. There's some familiar options. You remember Tyler Vaughn's? He was like third in the league in receiving. Dude, he was so good in the preseason. I'm a little surprised he hasn't gotten another shot. The last time he was in the NFL was when he was tearing up the preseason with the Steelers. Feel like he probably deserves another chance. That's why I put him down. Somebody mentioned Marcus Sims, the former West Virginia product. He's a bigger guy. A lot of the people that you're going to see with big numbers in the UFL or any of the spring leagues going back over the years, it's going to be a lot of guys that you look at them and you're like, well, here's why he's playing the UFL. He's 5'8", and the thing that about Tyler Vaughn's is he's 6'4", 6'1". Marcus Sims is 6'2". Like, those are legit guys with NFL size. So I think both of those guys probably deserve a chance. And maybe somebody with some kick return experience too. Cordell Patterson, very good, but 33 years old, has been hurt a bunch. and I'm not really sure, like right now, who I would say the backup kick returner is. It might be John Rice Plumlee. Like he's probably done it as much as anybody else throughout the spring. I think like someone, and I wrote down Chris Rowland was the DC Defenders kickoff returner, was led the UFL in kick return yards this year. They did not do the new NFL kick return, which I think was a huge missed opportunity. But those guys stood out to me. Who's the other ones I named? Carlos Davis. He's an old friend. Was a defensive tackle the Steelers drafted back in 2020. He had 6.5 sacks in 10 games this year. Did not see that from the old Carlos Davis that I know. So just maybe an interesting background to block if he's unlocked something in his game. And Breeland Speaks was the second-round pick of the Kansas City Chiefs. I feel like he's been around and available forever, but he led the UFL. He had 18.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons of spring football. Somebody's going to give him a chance. And the Steelers kind of have a little outside linebacker forward competition going on right now. A veteran guy wouldn't be necessarily the worst thing for that.
Yeah. One name I'll throw out is Jontre Kirkland. I think he's an interesting name. He's the second leading receiver in the XFL. If it goes with the theme of them signing every LSU Tiger that is possibly available on the market, first of all.
How much Ray Jenkins?
Yeah, right. They've signed everybody, but he's kind of interesting. Well, was really good in the XFL last year too. Was undrafted in 2022. Went with the Cardinals last year. Was with the Saints as well. So he's kind of interesting. Was a quarterback turned defensive back turned wide receiver. I mean, that's a crazy journey, but he's about 6 foot 190. He's got some nice quick twitch. So I think he could be an interesting name at receiver if they're looking to do a one-on-one replacement for Denzel Mims.
He was already around. He's had time with the Steelers last year, but different offensive coordinator, different quarterback. No thought that they could do the Hakeem Butler thing again?
Man,
I know it didn't go well, but
I like Hakeem Butler coming out of Iowa State too. But I'll say this, and Alan, I think you'll agree with me. When we watched Hakeem Butler last year, I didn't feel like a lot of his issues were related to scheme or coaching. It was inconsistencies, dropping stuff. You know, every year in Latrobe, I hear Mike Tomlin say routine things routinely about 100 million 50 times. And I just didn't feel like Hakeem Butler did that consistently. So usually Mike Tomlin doesn't circle back to that well. I mean, listen, he's a supremely talented player that has potential, clearly. But he's kind of, Alan, I think to me, he feels like what is the football equivalent of an AAA player. Like he is like too good for AAA, but not good enough for the bigs. That's what it feels like right now to me.
You know, it was interesting to me because the big thing with him that I felt like last year was the issue was the hands. And then he did suffer that sort of weirdly undescribed injury where he missed a preseason game and then he got cut. And I saw somebody report this year, and I don't even remember that we were aware of what the injury was. I saw somebody report this year that it was a hand injury. So if I was like trying to give him another chance, I guess that would be the reason why, to say like, okay, well, maybe he had something that was bothering him last year. But then I also looked at, and you guys are well aware, and I'm sure the audience is well aware of my feelings of Pro Football Focus. But I was looking at the PFF, grades for the UFL this season just as I was writing that story, and he was like a 75 with like 47 hands, and I was like, yeah, that kind of checks out. Like I can't say I watched every UFL game to grade it, but like that looks like the guy that I saw last year. So I probably would not go down that road again. I think someone like Tyler Vaughn's, where like it was just more about like he wasn't doing anything wrong. They had better receivers. I think I'd rather go down that road. Deion Kane is another guy who's been around forever. He was on the Steelers in 2019. He's played very well in those spring leagues too. I do wonder, like what I think we've seen pretty full scale adoption of these spring football leagues by NFL teams as sources of talent. I do wonder though, like, in Major League Baseball, the teams run the farm teams, right? So the Pirates don't want quad A players. In fact, the Pirates all the time like jettison their quad A players so that they can make room for their prospects, right? Like Braxton Ashcraft is going to come up to AAA, and the Pirates are going to cut some 30-year-old with a 4.50 ERA and tell him to go get lost and never come back because they don't want him again. This is an independent league. These teams don't have that same desire. They want to win games and they want to entertain their fans first and foremost. So, like, I wonder if we're going to get to a point where the USFL is full of Deion Kaynes and Hakeem Butlers that, like, every NFL team has seen you 3 times and they've decided they don't want you, and, like, there's going to be diminishing returns on picking over that league for talent.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think that's realistic too. Yeah, but I also think it's a nice way to get, the reason it's going to exist is because you get guys like Avante Turpin, for example, who are electric guys that slip through the cracks, end up coming back and playing really well. So you have just as many examples of guys coming back and making it too. But I do think that's a realistic concern. When you're looking at it all. But yeah, I think the Steelers might be looking here at a UFL guy. Try and sign one.
I mean, very specifically, like, I know this is not going to make anyone happy, but they have 1 long snapper and 1 punter on their 90-man roster. And every year I've gone to training camp, they've gone to training camp with 2 long snappers, 2 punters, and 2 kickers. Like, if they cut a wide receiver to sign a UFL long snapper, I think the fan base might explode. And that would be a perfectly normal, very typical move for this time of year. Like, just making it so that Christian Kuntz doesn't have to do it all day, every day at training camp. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
I don't know what you're talking about, but specifically for myself, I would be fired up to get a second long snapper on this roster.
Rick Sunahara, who was in camp last year, West Virginia alum, great dude, was in the UFL. Brad Wing, a great story, sort of redemption arc, got his chance with the Steelers last year. Bring them both back. Let's sign me up. I'm on board with that.
There we go.
Hey, if you were talking about former receivers, Matthew Sexton is now on the market. So
there you go.
Yeah, there you go. It was cut by the Falcons. Then to make way for 38-year-old Calais Campbell. I was told that 35 is too old to play defensive tackle in the NFL, yet people still want Calais Campbell, who is not as good as Cam Hayward and never has been.
There you go. Alan, all those UFL guys that we mentioned weren't necessarily receivers. You threw some other positions in there. You also just went down some specialists that could be added, which brings me to my next point where we can kind of follow up with that and say, okay, so not wide receiver. We know that there's a hole at wide receiver. Where else could this team look to add on the roster right now? Where could they still use some depth?
Yeah, I think specialist is one of them. I mean, I think guys that have experience returning kickoffs, like, you got to have somebody else ready if Cordero Patterson gets hurt, and I don't know that somebody else is on the roster right now. Backups at punter and long snapper. I think outside linebacker 4 is very much up in the air. They like some things about Jeremiah Moon, but he has no experience. David Perales is there. Kyron Johnson is there. I would not call that like an overwhelmingly deep group. Honestly, I'm not even sure that, like, Nick Herbig is definitely the 3. Like, I like him, but I mean, go look at who's still out there at edge rusher. There's some better ones than Nick Herbig out. Like, if they want to go down that road, that's certainly available to them as well. I think offensive tackle.
Yep.
If they want to entertain the thought of trading Dan Moore, they probably need someone else with some experience. Like, I really like Dylan Cook, and I think they have something. I think they found something there in him that is worth continuing to develop. But if they want to feel like they're in a position to entertain the idea of trading Dan Moore, they would need a 4th tackle with more experience than Dylan Cook's 0 career NFL games. I mean, DeVary Hamilton is there, and he does have maybe 9, but I don't think I think adding another person to that mix is certainly feasible. Those are the ones that stand out to me. Nick, what are your thoughts?
I think if the right opportunity comes along to bolster the interior defensive line, they shouldn't turn it down. I like some of the names they have there, but if they can get deeper and add another solid rotational piece to that group, I don't think you should turn that down. Just because we know Cam Hayward is 35 and Larry Ogunjobi has been banged up over his career. They have a number of guys there, but if the right guy comes along, I wouldn't turn that away. I think you have to keep the mind open to outside corner still. I know that they like Dante Jackson and Cam Sutton's back, and I really am intrigued by Corey Trice and Darius Rush. But the right guy comes along, you could make a move there. Outside of that, I think you named him. I think tackle's definitely an interesting one. I'll throw out one more that I think is a little interesting. Backup center, I think, is a little bit interesting. And the reason I say it is if Zach Frazier ends up starting, Spencer Anderson is playing exclusively at guard this year. Now, maybe he'd be the backup center in that scenario. But it's interesting to me to have him focus exclusively at guard when you drafted Mason McCormick. So if Zach Frazier wins the starting job, I think it's possible that they would explore trading Nate Herbig, in which case I think backup center could maybe rise as like a sneaky one. But I'm kind of like reaching with the nitpick stuff there. I really think outside of receiver, I think outside linebacker would be one. And I personally feel, with the right guy at interior defensive line, would make a lot of sense personally. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I could also see them looking maybe, at a safety. I could see that being, if they intend to keep 5 safeties, they have a lot of bodies in that room, and they have, Ron Watts, who was the young guy there, but maybe a guy that's akin to, an Elijah Riley-ish type. That could be something too that's more special teams incorporated, but I'm looking more at the 3 positions I just named than anywhere else.
When I was looking at the running backs, go ahead, Zach.
Well, no, I was just saying I like the D-line shout just because from a rotational standpoint, swapping out Armon Watts for Dean Lowry, to me, you're losing some pass rush juice. So if you find another, backup guy, rotational piece that can provide some of the pass rush juice that you're losing with losing Armon Watts, that would be a good thing for me. The other thing that I thought of, you mentioned the corner room there, and again, we expect Cam Sutton to play a lot of slot corner, but like we're also expecting him to be serve a suspension to some degree for however long that period of time is. Do we just feel comfortable enough with what the other options are there, or are you still looking to add a body in that spot?
Yeah, I mean, you could. If they don't like what they see in training camp out of, Scott, Bishop, Arnold, Graham, you could then at that point call up Patrick Peterson or someone else and fill that spot. Alan, I think that I'm pretty comfortable with what I've seen from Scott and Beanie to be okay with that spot right now, but there's a whole month in games to be played. But right now, I think I would feel okay about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are upgrades to be had at running back on what they have in their roster. I think just a lot of those guys would probably rather not be at training camp. So, like a lot of times those guys don't sign until they become needed. Like guys that have kind of hung around the league over the last few years and kind of filled in. Like you can certainly get some better backup running backs than the ones they've got. Like, do you really feel comfortable with anybody taking a half share role if either Najee Harris or Jalen Warren gets hurt out of the options they have? Like Cordell Patterson's, I mean, he can play running back, but he's not really an every down running back. I really think Aaron Shamklin has been the best of the rest of that bunch, but I'm not really sure that's saying a whole lot. And yeah, so I don't know, somebody that could be more like project to be more like an every down running back. I think that could be something they could be looking for, but it's also not. Yeah, usually those guys are out there in season, so it's not like a big deal that you need to have it on your roster either. But if they're looking to make a move, I think that's somewhere. And Anthony McFarland had a pretty solid spring in the UFL as well. He didn't play that much. I think he dealt with an injury, but like on a per carry basis, his numbers were pretty impressive. He was the guy that I always thought, man, we talked about him, I think, every training camp for 3-4 years where he looked really good, and those injuries or whatever, and maybe the injuries are the answer there, but he's certainly a guy I wouldn't mind bringing back.
Yeah, running back could be a place. I think in the event one of those guys get injured, I do have confidence in Cordell Patterson to be the fine too. So I don't think that's a huge issue. I think between Shamklin, Ward, Ryan, and Edwards, they'll be okay. That's just my opinion. I like, could there be an upgrade? Sure, but I'm not. If you went around the league, I'm not sure how many good running back fours you would find, anyways.
Is Frank Gore trying to play another season?
Lev Bell said he wanted to do it.
Oh man. Although this is Frank Gore's opportunity to be in the league at the same time as his son.
Let's just say this: I saw Frank Gore at the combine.
Mm-hmm.
He's still ripped. It could.
I wasn't expecting to actually make this a thing, but
no, I'm just throwing it out there. You threw it out.
Steelers have cut Denzel Mims and are signing Frank Gore. There you go. You heard it here first, folks.
There we go. Anything else? Either of you?
Nick, tell everybody what you're doing in Hawaii.
Yeah, I'm going to be going out to Hawaii, covering a few things, hang out with some of the players that are going to be out there. You know who they are because Pittsburgh is Hawaii's team. That includes, guys like Fahoko and Fautanu, Roman, all of that. I'm going to also visit the St. Louis school. If you don't know what the St. Louis school is, that's where Roman Wilson and Nick Herbig played high school ball together. So it's going to be a very Steelers heavy trip. That's what it's going to be. But I would bet money. I haven't done a statistical analysis on it that the Steelers have the most Hawaiians on a team right now. So
they only have the most Hawaiian / Polynesians.
Yeah.
They got a whole bunch.
Yes, they do. It's I think they have 5 Hawaiians and then more Polynesians on top of that because they have Troy Fautanu and Jalen Warren and a number of other guys that aren't from Hawaii but are Polynesian.
Nick's going to get a lot of exclusive stuff down there, and that will obviously be on the site, on his X page. So, Nick, tell the people how to get that stuff.
Yeah. You can find me on X at Farabaugh FB. Make sure to check in on all that stuff. Over on SteelersNow.com, make sure to read it, of course. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell. We should have also some content coming to the YouTube channel from there. So should all be really good, including one thing that I'm really excited for. Alan, you know what it is, but it'll be fun. It'll be fun.
Oh, look at this. Hey, Nick is learning so much just from being on the YouTube channel once or sometimes twice within a week. Now he's even teasing stuff on here. He told the people to subscribe, hit the notification bell. This is glorious. Alan, tell the people they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on Twitter, because I'm intransigent, Instagram, and TikTok, where today's wonderful news story came from.
There we go.
And you can find Steelers Afternoon Drive clips on TikTok too. So if you're of the Gen Z persuasion, you can get us in 90-second clips because we know that's all you can handle.
Yeah, if the 32 minutes is too long for you, there you go. 90 seconds or so over at Steelers Afternoon Drive on TikTok. If you're listening somewhere else, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. Search Steelers Afternoon Drive. You can find us there, and be sure to do that. Like Nick said, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and hit us in the comments here. For Alan Saunders, for Nick Farabaugh, and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.